files to us which show reach and frequency by audience demographic and by DMA. And without going into details, we've calibrated their data against our highest quality panel, which is our cross-platform homes panel. We've identified some areas that we need to adjust when we get that raw data back. And what we essentially do at the end of the day is we provide reach and frequency by demographic and by DMA. So this is meant to be comparable to TV. It's meant to be highly accurate. It's meant to be realish. So that's kind of what it is. But what's the impact of that, right? So really what we're trying to figure out is reach. That's the most important thing for us right now. Let's at least get a baseline reach number that we really understand. And so when you look at 30 to 50% pickup rates, that's a huge difference. Because in online, we do things quickly and we do things granularly. Most companies, when you're targeting or making placements online, you do it at site level with data providers. And what you really want to do is get feedback as quick as you can and make decisions quickly. So with a 1% pickup rate, you end up having to serve hundreds of thousands, if not millions of impressions to get one single data. When you're talking about a read rate of 30 to 50%, you're talking tens of thousands. And so what that means is that you're able to, that you can make decisions very quickly. Furthermore, by putting that as a feed back into VideoHub's platform, that means we can actually start helping their customers make decisions with all the different data sets that they have to layer on top of it based on smaller reads. So that's online campaigns. Today, actually, we announced officially we've come out of beta with cross-platform campaign ratings, which is the next iteration. And this is important because if you think of video as video, you want to buy it or sell it across all your different platforms. And until now, essentially, if I were to watch TV, I would be counted as one person. If I were to go online, all of a sudden I'm another person. Okay? So all of a sudden, people accuse me of being split personality sometimes, but I'm actually the same person. And if I frequency cap online at 3, and then I look for an ideal frequency on TV or something else, and I'm the same person, then you're really serving each media. And in similar vein, you have people who are not in the corresponding media that you're missing. So the goal of this was, how do you bring TV and online together? And what we've done is we've taken our TV panel and our online campaign ratings, and we put the two of them together. We have a cross-platform homes panel we use to deduplicate audiences. And so what our brands now are able to look at is a TV, and what this shows, a TV audience, an online audience, in the part that's duplicated. And so you're going to be hearing a lot more about this soon. The one thing I'll mention on this before I hand it back over to Anthony is that we recognize that this is about reach first and foremost. If you think about it, GRP is reach times frequency, right? And frequency may or may not be different based on what you're doing. If you have engaging ad units and people engage with them, maybe you don't need to show them the same ad and the same amount of frequency, right? And we recognize that different platforms have different capabilities. So the baseline, let's get reach right. And what Anthony will talk to you about is how do you look at effectiveness.
Subtitle of the presentation is Two Guys with No Hair Talk About Video. Andrew touched on this a little bit, and again, efficiency gets an awful lot of attention, right? Because in our world, it seems like if you can do something faster, you should. We kind of take a little bit different approach, in that we think effectiveness always trumps efficiency. And so you should focus on making it work, and then figure out how to make it work faster and more easier and less friction, etc. So part of this effectiveness versus efficiency drives me a little crazy because we read a lot of articles about efficient media buying, and it seems like we've lost the marketing piece of this, which is I need to reach that consumer. I need to get to them and talk to them in the way that they want to listen to my brand message. So part of what we do is look at a lot of video. We're able to read content streams of video. We obviously serve a heck of a lot of video ads. The scale of what we do across, publishers, literally thousands and thousands of publishers, and 4 billion streams, and almost 2 billion ads for this particular report, which comes out of our performance replay report we put out every quarter, and I highly suggest you go and download it at videohub.tv or videohub.com and take a look at it. And so we take this broad swath and we look at all of this data. And the nice thing is that we have a lot of insight into what's happening. And that's also the bad thing, is that we have a lot of insight into what's happening, because you have to be able to identify what's important, what matters. And part of this is being willing to be surprised, right? Let the data drive you to the solution rather than always have a straw man set up and say, I know men of this age group and this income are going to buy my product. That's a good hypothesis, but then use the data to moderate that or modulate that as the campaign is actually running. So if we look at it again across those almost 2 billion ads, call it a gazillion because 2 billion is a number that's just too hard to imagine. The different types of outcomes you're looking to drive. And this is the data that we saw, the signals or the variables that are driving brand health, clicks or engagements, or completions, right? Everyone understands those three buckets, right? One is this an intent to purchase? Do I feel great about Ford or Disney or whatever? Am I driving clicks? Am I getting engagement in my ad unit? And are people watching the video ad all the way through? Remember, you want to be surprised. So for brand metrics, the number one thing we saw that drove the most impact, intent to purchase, favorability, brand health metrics, was geo. So when was the last time anyone read an article talking about geo related to brand health? Anyone? Is Gavin O'Malley in here? I don't think he's in the MediaPost. No one writes about this, right? Why? I don't know, but maybe it's not sexy. Maybe we thought we solved the geo problem 20 years ago. But it turns out that geo, frequency, and publisher were the top three things driving performance and brand health. Not on a campaign, not on a single publisher, hundreds of publishers, hundreds of campaigns, billions of ads served, 1.8 billion ads served. Geo was the most important. For clicks and engagements, for everyone who thinks the publishers are dead, right? They're still an important part of this ecosystem. It was publisher, the size of the player, and oddly enough, the browser type. Now, listen, I've got no religion. This is just data, right? This is just what we saw. It's math. And you look through this list, and maybe some of these things are important to you. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't. Frequency is one of those ones that jumps around depending upon the type of campaign you're running, so you have great variations in the range. And then completions. What drove completions? This was the only one that I bet right on. I thought the publisher, the content you were going to review, would have the biggest impact on completions. So I'm really interested in that content. If I really want to watch that Britney Spears video, I'm going to sit through the ads and watch the whole thing through 100%. And so the one on the right here, completion, is not that surprising. So what do you think is surprising in here? The thing least likely, the signal or variable least likely to drive performance against any marketing outcome we have was demographics. Demographics by itself had almost no impact. Now again, this is across a huge data set within, and Andrew challenged me on this earlier today, within a campaign, certainly, if I'm selling pantyhose or, truck tools, those are going to be highly gender skewed. But across this continuum of all these ads, across all of these CPG, auto, QSR, etc., demographics really didn't matter that much. Demographics by themselves are a baseline. You start at the baseline, and then you layer on what is important. So, publisher and demographics, when you line that up together for clicks and engagements, actually were very highly ranked. Individually, each one of these, if the demographics came at the bottom, and a geo publisher and publishers sort of winning the race at the top. I am going to bet that very few people would have thought that audience came at the bottom of this. And for your campaign, it may be different. I'm just sharing the data that we see within the Video Hub. And it's important to remember this when you're targeting, when you're buying, when you're measuring, that you ought to be surprised by the data periodically. And if you're not, you're probably not trying, right? You're probably not marketing if you're not failing occasionally. So for your brands, for your agencies, for your publishers. Step forward a little bit, take some risks. Tim also was saying this morning. We need to be marketers again. We need to bring a little Mad Men culture involved, or at least the risk-taking piece of it, into what we do in digital marketing, and surprise ourselves with data and read and react on it. So I think I have managed to save 3 minutes, and I'd love to have some questions. And what's holding you back? What is surprising to you? And so have that. I think we've got a microphone floating around. If not, you can shout. And by the way, you can download. That's the URL to download the performance report, which is a hugely interesting read. Anybody?
Hi, Mark Scatoli, Piper Jaffray. Question for Andrew. This might be a little bit off topic, but you touched on it. Just viewability of ads. Lots of, controversy as to what is theoretically viewable. I'm just curious if that you see it improving, you see it getting more challenging, just with increasing, as you mentioned, dynamic ads and messages, et cetera.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that. I mean, our approach really has been first and foremost to get the reach right and then to look at viewability on top of that. So I think one thing I'll say, it seems from what we've seen so far like video is not in the same place display is when you look at viewability. I think my guess is that the shrinking margins in display and a vast amount of inventory have really caused the display industry to kind of go down a wrong route in a lot of ways. Not to say it's not a problem on video, it is. And Video Hub, as a matter of fact, has a very good way of looking at viewability. I think it's something that's going to continue to be a concern there as well. And I don't know if, and the other thing I'll say is I think with the attention being focused on it, with things like what Video Hub is doing with viewability, I think it's not always nefarious. It's not always like people are trying to hide things. I think a lot of times they just don't actually have the information they need to improve. I don't know, you might want to say something.
Yeah, it's become a hotter and hotter topic, and we think it's becoming more important over the next year. And we're actually providing to both publishers and agencies the ability to understand viewability. So what percentage of the ad was in view, what percentage was partially obscured, et cetera. And we're a little, the IAB should be coming out with some standards around that, but we've taken some educated bets on what those standards are going to be, and have pushed out ahead of that with our ability to look at viewability. Anybody else? Come on, good morning. Got to be one more question.
Hey there. Good morning. I'm Analyst Forbes from TrialPay. Quick question about the duplication from TV to desktop. How are you able to do that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure. So if you think about the way we capture our data, for television we have a TV panel, and then online we're using online campaign ratings to do this. So the question is, how do you take the two of them and match them together and understand the duplication, right? So there's a segment of our TV panel where we look at everything they're doing on television and online. And essentially that serves as our lab to be able to look at the deduplication on it. So TV, online campaign ratings, and then the deduplication.
Hi, Tommy Jarvis, Olympic Media Consultancy. The IAB is wrestling with standards and suggesting that 50% viewable will be kind of the minimal threshold. In your data, can you actually identify those ads that are 100% viewable? Because certainly when I consult with my agencies and my advertiser clients, I suggest to them that unless you're paying 50% of the ad, then only then is 50% acceptable. So where are you on that whole issue? Thank you.
Right. It's a good question. And the viewability piece in video is far more important, right? Because it's time-based, right? It just disappears, if you turn away or if it's below the screen, et cetera. So what we're able to do, because we read the video stream, part of the technology is that we know what video is showing, what the content is, et cetera. I can tell you by percentages as that pre-roll is playing, just for a 15-second pre-roll, at start, at 50%, at 75%, at finish, whether it was 100% on screen, 25% off screen, not viewable at all. And as Andrew said, it's rarely nefarious, right? It's rarely because people are trying to run something somewhere. Video is a little bit too hard to do that with. It's just that maybe the publisher doesn't have all of the tools to understand that themselves. And so we had this aha moment saying we don't want to be the police, we want to be the partner, right? So how do we help both the publishers and the advertisers see the same viewability information? And then some of the publishers that our agencies run on through the Video Hub were like, oh yeah, we're going to move that into a larger player, or we're going to change the layout of the screen because if I can drive better performance, the publisher can drive better rates, the advertiser is happy, et cetera. So we think it's key. The IAB, my sense is that they're working really, really hard on it. They hear from us enough. So hopefully within the next 6 months or so, we'll see something there.
If I can add one thing, I think there's an underlying current for why I think Video Hub and we partner so much. And what you're hearing, I think the common trend is transparency, right? So the more you make it, the more you show both the advertiser and the publisher the same types of numbers, the easier it is for them to react to one another. That's a call my cue.
So you guys going to be around for a couple minutes to chat with anybody outside?
Sure.
Yeah. All right, everybody, let's have a big hand for Video Hub.
Okay, everybody, if you would kindly take your seats, come on in. We're trying to get started and add some more value to your already hopefully valuable morning. Come on in, there are plenty of seats available, good seats available. All right, fantastic. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is well caffeinated and ready to hang in there until a late lunch. My name is Tim Hanlon. I am the founder and CEO of a group called the Natalie Group out of Chicago. We focus on strategic consulting and investment advisory around all forms of emerging media, marketing, and technology. We have a 15-plus year background in the ad agency world, focusing on emerging technologies and media. So the excitement, I can tell you, from the perch outside of big agency holding companies continues unabated, and the world continues to change and evolve and turn and revolve and emerge, whether we like it or not. Yours truly will be kind of just emceeing pretty much the video portion of this OMMA deal, and thanks all for coming, and hopefully you'll stick around for some excellent conversation and thought start. I thought this was actually a very prudent starting point, our first keynote speaker, coming off of what the Video Hub guys were just talking about. It's very clear, I think, to anybody in any form of the video content and advertising landscape, whether you're a legacy television provider seeking to continue to engage with consumers, reach them, measure them, or on the online side, now crossing the chasm, if you will, into the realms of television. Measurement, attribution, understanding where consumers, where audiences are actually watching the content, whether they're doing it legally or illegally. The ability to monetize that, assuming that that measurement can be derived into some form of Nielsen 2.0 or Nielsen 3.0 currency. These are all really challenging issues that I think, frankly, consumers are already ahead of the game on, but the business isn't necessarily. So I think that's the thematics I would sort of continue to sort of suggest to you as you hear our presentations and our panels. So to kick that off, Enoch from ESPN is obviously from an entity that understands multi-platform and has been at the cutting edge of video across many of those platforms, sometimes prescient, sometimes early, sometimes dead on. And sports and live programming in particular is probably an excellent harbinger of how not only data and cross-platform measurement is going to occur, but the currency or currencies that come along with that. So, without any further ado, I present to you Glenn, and pay attention because there will be a quiz after the presentation. Thank you. Glenn, take it away.
All right, Glenn, two words. So I took the Keynote's privilege and changed the title of the session. We're going to be looking at cross-platform measurement as it exists today, and I'm going to provide some thoughts on how we might move beyond this to better measurement and better planning and better ad serving tomorrow. Whenever you start a presentation, you're at that very first slide, that blank slide, and you're thinking to yourself, what am I going to say? At ESPN, it's very easy. At ESPN, it always starts with a sports fan. And our mission, which is to serve sports fans anytime, anywhere, to us this is not just a plaque by the water cooler. I'm not suggesting it is in your company, but you may work in a company where they have a plaque by the water cooler that just has words on it and nobody pays attention. To us, it really does inform everything that we do. And our mission is to serve sports fans wherever they are, whatever they're doing, and whatever device they're using. And because of this, we have a large number of people that we're serving. 9 out of 10 Americans say that they're sports fans to one degree or another, and about a third of what we would consider avid sports fans, which mean that they're at the top of the scale in our nationwide ESPN sports poll. Now, here's something this speaks to, by the way, why sports is harbinger, is the word we use. It is such a great harbinger of technology use. The more money you make, the more sports you watch. Are all the advertisers writing this thing? It's almost a linear relationship. Not only do higher income homes spend more minutes watching sports each day, but because they're wider television viewers, it's a greater percentage of all the TV viewing that they do. What this chart shows, the green line is the minutes per day spent watching sports, nationally televised sports, and the purple line is the percent of all TV viewing it does at each of these income levels from lowest to highest. So, for example, households that are under $20,000 per year income spend about 28 minutes watching sports, and it makes up about 5% of all their TV viewing. Households at the top end of the scale, 125,000 plus, spend 46 minutes, and it's 11% of all their TV viewing. So the thing to notice here is that it's 50% more minutes, but it's over double the share of TV viewing in households like that. So as a result of that, we shouldn't find it so surprising that sports fans are on the cutting edge of change in media behavior. They're above average adopters of all kinds of technology, smartphones, tablets, 3D TV sets that have internet connectivity, game consoles, over-the-top devices, streaming audio packages, you name it, and sports fans get it first. So for ESPN, that means that we have to stay ahead of the consumer with all of our content, and not just video content. I realize that this is the video conference, but ESPN is producing not only video, but also audio and display content across all devices and platforms. Television, both in-home and out-of-home, online and mobile video, PC web and mobile web, apps, tablets, digital audio, terrestrial radio, magazines. You spoke about legacy providers and the chasm between online video and televised video. For us, there's no legacy and no chasm. For us, it's all part of a unified whole. It's just what we do every day. And the other thing that makes ESPN unique is that we provide a consistent brand across all these platforms. So it's one brand, ESPN, and one brand identity across TV, audio, PCs, mobile, and print. And we don't think, we've looked carefully over the years, we don't think any other content provider can make that claim. So as a result, we're really, really focused on the multi-platform consumer. The sports fan who's not only watching ESPN TV networks, but who's consuming our content on other platforms. 20 years ago, advertisers on ESPN were mostly reaching sports fans watching TV, and frankly, mostly watching TV at home. And now we're building touch points with fans from the minute that they get up to the minute they go to bed. We reach them wherever they are, whatever they're doing, again, whatever device they're on. We've been doing research on cross-platform media usage for 12 years, and we've seen a lot of change in that time. Our first tool was the survey that we call ESPN All Day, Every Day. We're actually outliving other companies. We started with SRI, and it became Knowledge Networks, and now it's GFK. So our surveys are actually lasting longer than the companies that do them. In 2002, this showed that 28% of our weekly users were multi-platform users who were watching us on TV and, again, using one of our other platforms, listening to us on radio or going to the website or whatever it was. By 2010, this had grown to 44% of all the people who were using us each week. And more importantly, the 44% of users represented 64% of all the time that people spent with ESPN content. These people are bigger sports fans, they're following sports throughout the day, and they're consuming ESPN in multiple locations on multiple platforms, as we've shown again and again with our research. So in March of 2010, we moved all of our cross-platform research to a new level with the establishment of ESPN XP, which is our branded umbrella initiative that encompasses all of our cross-platform research. So ESPN XP isn't a thing, it's a collection of different projects that we've done since 2010, including ones that we were doing before that. The three goals of ESPN XP are these. First is to move cross-platform research from a special project to a standard practice. So in 2012, today, if we wanted to explore how sports fans are consuming our NFL content across all our platforms, we can do that. But we have to commission a study or a series of studies for that purpose, And when football season is over, the study comes to an end, and it doesn't tell us anything about what fans are doing with our NBA content. So we may commission another study to move on to our first and second quarter cross-platform performance. The second goal is to inform media plans with predictive measures and consumer insights. This means that we want to help our advertiser and agency partners to understand how consumers are using media now and how they can use data on this to build better media plans. Thirdly, to link to existing media currencies and ad performance research. So we're not trying to replace any currency. What we're trying to do is to get them to work together in a system of cross-platform research. Since the founding of ESPN XP, we've worked with over 20 research suppliers. More, in fact, I think, than we found logos for. Our Advertiser Insights group has worked with dozens of advertisers looking at contextual advertising, effects created by the individual platforms, as well as the combinations of the platforms, the communication strengths of different platforms on the way to purchase. Plus, they're engaging on a continuing conversation with our advertisers to make sure that we're directing our energy to answer the right questions and we have the right focus for the research. We were the charter subscribers to Nielsen's Convergence Panel. We were the first company to work with USA Touchpoints in a live market situation, and also the charter subscriber for their syndicated product. Our World Cup research project represented the first attempt by a media company to measure the 5 platforms around a single event, including both media usage and advertiser effects. We published our 7 principles of cross-platform research, which included widely quoted but not correctly attributed ideas like best available platform. So in short, we think that we have applied more resources and more time to the issue of cross-platform research than anybody else. And so at this point, let's just take a look at where we are with cross-platform research today. Well, there's a lot we can do. Metrics and currencies. I think people talk a lot about, do we need a single currency? Do we need new metrics? Our position on this is that, and this is one of our 7 principles of cross-platform research, we already have the metrics that we need to understand consumer behavior across platforms. And they might be called different things on different platforms, but the 3 things that we need to know are how many people did a behavior, in other words, used a set of content or were exposed to a given ad campaign, how often were they exposed, and how long did they spend with this exposure. In addition, and we do this a lot at ESPN, we're big proponents of this, we can calculate an average minute audience across the platform. So how many people are watching TV, listening to radio, using PCs, on mobile devices, just in this room, at this very minute. And in fact, we have regular reports that we put out internally showing an average minute audience to the ESPN TV networks and to our online content. Now, if all we want to do is look at how consumers spend time with different media, then we're there already. We can take our currency and other measures. This is actually a combination of Nielsen, Comscore, Arbitron, and MRI. And we can put them together to paint a picture of how consumers are spending their day with media. This is an example of something we do. We call it the Skipper Project, and we're not sucking up to John Skipper. We did it for him before he was appointed president of the network, but he was interested in this a few years ago. And it's a pie, not of sports usage, of total media usage. 60% of the time people spend with media is on TV, and 21% with radio, and so forth and so on. So time measures is something that we can already do. Using, again, the currency and other measures, we can measure how many people or users there are of each of the platforms. So we can look at Nielsen, we can get TV, we can look at Arbitron, we can get audio, we can look at Comscore, for example, and get PCs or internet. However, this is where we get to the point where we start to need more work. Duplication is very, very difficult. Figuring out how those TV viewers and mobile users and radio listeners overlap is very, very difficult. These 5 circles overlap to form 31 different combinations of media usage. So how many people in each of these groups are there in the average day, and then in the average week, and the average month? We just don't really have any way of doing that yet. There are very many specific things that we need that we don't have. So for example, to measure the number of persons consuming ESPN or any football content across all devices, again, we can do it, and we have done it. But it means it's a special project where we have to engage multiple providers in a specific time. It's not 365 days a year, and it doesn't tell us anything about the total media usage of these college football fans. Following sports fans and their media use throughout the day or the week. Again, we can do this with a couple of different providers, but we can't do it at the level of granularity we want, and we can't do it with all of our branded content. Measuring simultaneous use of TV and a tablet or a smartphone or some other mobile device. This may surprise you. There have been a lot of headlines about this. There is a lot of research floating around about this. It's always some very high percentage of consumers sitting and doing this while they're watching TV. But it's largely self-reported or diary data. And we've learned, if nothing else, that we've learned with ESPN XP, is that nothing beats metered average minute data when you're working on simultaneous usage. Now, we suspect that a lot of people are doing this, but how much time are they spending doing it? And what's the content on each screen? We just don't know. And finally, reach and frequency curves for cross-media planning based on actual exposure data. There is no industry standard for a way to get to do this. All agencies have figured out a way to do it so they can conduct business, but we figure they can only be improved by having some real data in the system. So here's where we are with cross-platform research. It's a bunch of limits, frankly. There are limited combinations of media. We can go to companies and do projects, but sometimes there's a trade-off between granularity and the scope of what you're looking at. So in order to get granularity, sometimes you'll look at just TV and internet, or just internet and print, or just mobile and internet, or whatever it is. Eliminate limited combinations of media to make the project possible. Or, on the other hand, you have to give up granularity of data. Instead of looking at average minute, you're looking at half hours or day parts. Limited sample sizes or non-projectable samples. Very frequently, people will say, I want to do a 3-screen study, so I want to look at people who have 3 screens. Well, there is no establishment survey of the number of people in the U.S. who have 3 screens, so there's no way you can take your findings and express that in terms of the total population. Or, in order to do the project, you have very small samples, and they're not projectable to the total U.S. Limited project length. Again, we can do projects for the World Cup. We can do projects for college football. We can do projects for other things that we've done, but they have a definite start and end. And when they end, we have to start all over again with some other project. And finally, limited ability to report on the data. There's kind of 4 steps on the way to a syndicated project. The first is the technology to measure. So you need a meter or some way of doing it. You need a sample. You need to select a sample. You need to edit the data. And then finally, you need to deliver the data to the user. And at this point, whenever we engage one of these projects, it's often a custom deliverable that doesn't really work with anything else. We're not taking things that we already have and already know how to use and are able to be used on a variety of different situations. They're sort of custom spreadsheets or macros or whatever it is. So we can do a lot, but there's still a lot of limits in order to what we're doing. So in order to fulfill the 3 goals of ESPN XP, here's what we believe ESPN and the industry as a whole needs. We need to measure our video, audio, and display content in a nationally projectable, 5-platform, continuously operating, persons-based, content-inclusive, integrated media solution. So not much. It's a modest ask. But I think it's what we and it's what you need as well. As part of our search for the solution, ESPN and some other media brands of the Walt Disney Company are members of SIM, which is the Coalition for Innovative Media Measurement. I could pause at this moment and ask if any SIM members are in the audience. Yes. Oh, Jane. Perfect. Excellent. That was my second question. And is Jane Clark here? SIM was founded in 2009 by some leading television content providers, media agencies, and advertisers to promote innovation, that's the I, and audience measurement for television across platform media, and they're exploring new approaches to audience measurement through some proof-of-concept pilot studies, and some of these are efforts asking what solutions can be developed to measure use of media across platforms. Well, last year, SIM commissioned some pilot projects from Artron and from ComScore, and both of these were designed to measure video content across 3 screens. And briefly, here's what they were. Artron had a 500-person single-source panel that was drawn from reactivated PPM panels. So these were people that had carried PPM, and now they were being reactivated and carried again. But in addition, Artron was able to measure 3-screen usage by a PC meter, on-device meter, and they were able to measure Windows, Android, and BlackBerry usage within these 500 people. They did this for a 3-month period from November 2011 to January of 2012. ComScore recruited a 10,000-person multi-screen panel. It's a much larger panel, but it was sort of a different kind of project. They had access to households with TV service from a major telecommunications company. And they recruited 10,000 of them to measure their 3-screen usage by using the ComScore technology on both tablet and smartphone. So they were getting 3 screens sort of in a different way, and they did this for 2 months in 2011. In short, the Arbitron project was about single source measurement, while the ComScore project was about data integration. And we were impressed with the results of both of these projects. However, they were both pilots, they were relatively small scale, and to get either one of these to full scale or national scale cross-platform measurement would require enormous investment and effort. However, we thought we had a better idea. Instead of taking these small but promising projects and scale them up, why not start with the national scale products of both companies and put them together, utilizing the best lessons from the same project. So last spring, we asked them to meet with us to talk about a way to bring the measurement strengths of both Arbitron and ComScore together. And the result of that meeting is the collaborative project that we announced 2 weeks ago, and which I'm going to outline for you now, I should say, for the first time in any public forum. This will be, again, the first 5-platform measurement initiative looking at video, audio, and display usage across TV, radio, PC, smartphone, and tablet. It's going to integrate the complementary research sources of both Arbitron and ComScore, the census and tag and panel-based PC, mobile, and set-top measurement capabilities of ComScore with the enhanced single-source TV and radio measurement capabilities of the Arbitron portable people meter. And it's going to combine the best of the 2 SIM projects, utilizing both single-source and data integration methodology. First, we're going to supply data on each of the platforms. So for TV, what we're going to do is we're going to put together set-top box or return path data from ComScore, from a major provider, with demographic viewing information from Arbitron's PPM. In addition, Arbitron is going to be providing information on out-of-home TV viewing. Radio is going to come from Arbitron's core business, which is measuring radio. So a lot of this is fueled by the strength of Arbitron's portable people meter. The digital measurement, and what we're doing here, by the way, is we're collapsing smartphone and tablet into mobile, because I needed room on the slide. That's one of the reasons. ComScore is going to be supplying usage from their unified data measurement technique, which combines tag census data from websites, so we tag all of our content for their measurement, and the data from their PC and mobile panels. So that's how we're going to get to usage by platform. And again, if all we wanted to do was represent how consumers were spending their time with different platforms, we wouldn't need this project. We could do that today. The primary goal, though, is to be able to measure duplication across the platform, so the overlapping circles. And in order to do this, the project's going to take the data sources, which I just reviewed with you, and measure overlapping reach, and we're going to proceed in a pairwise fashion. So the overlap between TV and radio, we're going to get from the Arbitron PPM panel. The overlap between PC and mobile, we're going to get from ComScore's existing tag census data. ComScore is also going to be able to go into the TV data and look at online usage from within the very similarly to the way that they did it in the SIM project, and they can also, utilizing their PC and mobile data, do all 3 of them together. So, utilizing a variety of methods and the best available sources for data, we're going to paint a picture of overlapping use across 4 circles, which actually, again, represent 5 different platforms. Now, a reasonable person might ask, how are you going to be sure that you've got the 4 circles overlapping properly since you're not really measuring all 4 of them at the same time? And the answer is that we're putting together, and by we, I mean Arbitron and ComScore, specifically Arbitron in this case, is putting together a calibration panel that's going to be a single source measure of all the platforms together. So they're going to take 2,000 Arbitron PPM panelists and measure TV and radio usage from them, and then they're going to download a ComScore cookie so the ComScore downstream can measure their digital usage. So from this 2,000 panel, this isn't really at the brand level, it's at the total media usage level. This will enable us to assure that we've got the 4 or 5 platforms, 4 circles aligned properly from the previous slide. And here's how the whole thing comes together. We have platform usage for TV, for radio, for PC, for tablets, for smartphones. We have platform duplication measured in 2 different ways to make sure we've got it right. And these will all flow into a client interface, which is another thing that we're working on. What we announced a couple of weeks ago, which was the agreement by ComScore and Arbitron to work together on a cross-platform project with ESPN as the charter client and the collaborator, represents just phase 1 of the project. In phase 1, we're going to build these duplication measures, we're going to create the calibration panel, We're going to develop some kind of deliverable. ESPN is going to collaborate on the design, which means I send them emails every day. And the data that we're going to get out of this is data on our platform on total media usage. And as part of this, we're going to lay the foundation for phase 2. There's going to be an assessment phase. We're going to take the data that we start pulling out of the project and analyze the results. We're going to confirm that what looks so good on paper is actually working and see where it needs to be tweaked. We're going to, at some point, take the opportunity to share some general findings and the methodology with other clients, with the industry as a whole. And at that point, Comscore and Arbitron are going to start seeking input from other measured media sectors. This initiative lays the foundation for a national-scale, continuously operating, syndicated, cross-platform measurement solution for the media and marketing industries, which is represented here as Phase 2, which will start on as soon as we're done with assessing Phase 1. And the goal here is to produce common metrics across all platforms at the scale and granularity required by both content providers and by advertisers, and to demonstrate the audience reach and duplication of each media platform. Our current plans, Arbitron and the Comscore plans, are to develop a service offering that would be available to all media companies, to all advertisers, to all advertising agencies that wish to understand and measure the audience size, composition, and impact of media content and marketing efforts as listened to and viewed across multiple platforms. So, at the end of the Battle of Britain, but still faced with the task of defeating the Axis army, Winston Churchill said, "Now is not the end. And it's not the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning." And I'm here to tell you today that for this project, this is the beginning of the beginning. I don't have any data to show you. I have a blueprint for what's going on. There's a lot of work to be done before we're going to be trotting out any data. But we do hope to come back next year, earlier, we hope, rather than later, and report to you on how we're doing with this project to the industry. And you can also follow us on Twitter at ESPN Research. So please do that as well.
Excellent. I want to get some questions from the audience. I'm going to start with, I think, a softball. Glenn, can you give me some idea of when this kind of stuff starts to inch towards anything related to a currency conversation, right? Where buyers and advertisers can start to gel around these insights and these ideas?
Yeah, I think that currency is a word that is thrown about in these discussions, and metric in sort of a confusing way. There's really kind of 3 steps. Tim defines the 3 steps. If you go to their website, they define 3 classes of projects that they work on. The way that I think about it is there's planning, purchasing, and posting. And a currency is just what you use to transact the business. So, in effect, what you're measuring is how many people are going to get exposed to the ad. And I think the people from Video Hub and Nielsen expressed it nicely that, you know, when you say grip, it sort of is like a word that gets people's back up because it sounds like, oh, you're trying to make everything measured like TV. When all it really is everybody needs to know, how many gross exposures did I have? How many people were exposed to my campaign? How often were they exposed to it? How much time did I get in total? And it's just a simple graph that, you know, as you increase the number of exposures, you increase reach, and you increase frequency. What we don't have for cross-platform measurement is a way to understand how to do that. So again, everybody has either random duplication or some kind of modeled duplication, but it's not really being fueled by actual data. And whatever you think the currency is, when you sit down as a buyer and seller to transact the money per the exposure, which is what we're trying to get to, you have to have some way of understanding if I have 60% of 100,000, a million exposures on TV, 20% on PC, 10% on radio, whatever it is, and I decide I want to change that to 50%, well, you have no way of knowing what the effect is. If you're successful with a cross-platform campaign today, you have no way of knowing what you did, so that you can do it differently or do it exactly the same in the future. And that, I think the currency thing is a bit different. Like, we're going to replace Nielsen with something. That's not what we're at. What we're at is really understanding the cross-platform.
As a corollary, please raise your hand with questions. Are you really talking about the evolution of currencies, plural? Right, that maybe are a bit more customizable or a bit more dependent upon what a marketer or an agency team's needs are. That may not necessarily be the replacement of a Nielsen, but to a retailer, certain metrics are more important than something else for a brand marketer versus others, right? Is there variability now, maybe in the eyes of the buying holder, that you might need to start servicing coming out of this research versus negotiating off of a Nielsen number, which arguably doesn't align very well with how people are consuming?
Yeah, that's a bit of a, all advertisers want to reach their customers. But buying is much more efficient at large demographic groups. I mean, that's just a fact of what we're doing today. And you can, with data today, all kinds of data today, find consumers of various products. It's totally possible to do that today. I don't think that that's a huge need. What we do have is, if I want to find the best way to reach my customers across platforms, we lack real data to do that. And we're trying to fill that need with this project.
Questions? Especially those furiously taking notes. Go ahead, please. You can also identify who you are, but wait until.
Hi, I'm Liza Horan. Thank you very much. This, at the outset, is looking for reach and frequency. You mentioned that. Where does it get into engagement? Certainly, one of the things I think is going to be discussed here and throughout the whole week is where's branding and advertising, and where's the action to the actual purchase. So is this fantastic and very ambitious project eventually getting to the quality of the engagement?
I sat through many ARF meetings thinking to myself, all I'm hearing about is the qualitative effect of the platform. So how does an ad on PC and an ad on mobile and an ad on TV, what's the quality of that exposure? I was thinking to myself, if we knew everything there was to know about that, we could not plan a cross-platform campaign today. And that's really where I have focused my efforts. We have, within ESPN XD, we have a triangle, which I did not bring with me today, that involves, measuring the different currencies or different measures of the platforms, measuring the audience across platforms, and measuring the advertising effect. We're completely interested in that, and in our ad lab in Austin, we've done a lot of work on this. That is really what this project is about. It's not to say that it's not adaptable to that in the future, but assuming that you knew, in other ways what the effect was, you still would need to tune that in some kind of planning model. So we're very, very focused on this. We're not trying to be all things to all people. And engagement, or as we like to call it around ESPN XD, the E word, reminds me of my favorite joke, which is that a guy came up to me the other day on the street and said, how about $1 for a sandwich? And I said, well, first let me see your sandwich. First let me know what your engagement is. It means something different to everybody. It's the elephant and the blind thing is the perfect example of what engagement is. I think everybody wants to get to the buying exactly enough to produce the maximum effect and the maximum return of the cash register. This is just, and it's a very complicated thing. I don't think there's going to be one thing that does everything. This is one part that we felt was sorely needed in that infrastructure.
And that's, by the way, that's maybe where that variability that I was leading to with that previous question comes in. Engagement and that definition may be in the eye of the buying holder, right? And providers of content and ad opportunities become a bit more of an operating system, so to speak, that buyers essentially leverage off of with all the great data that they bring to the table. Yes, please. The microphone comes to you. Here you are.
Tony Jarvis, Olympic Media Consultancy. I think first of all we should all applaud ESPN for taking the leadership on what is a project that we've all dreamed of and wanted for very many years, and certainly it's wonderful that we have SIM as a vehicle, if you will, to pursue this path. So congratulations, and well deserved. And having said that, and I appreciate ESPN not only wants to look at programming data, which is, if you will, as important as the advertising data, but I'm going to stick with the advertising side. And with respect, Glenn, you threw out the term ad exposure, and you threw out the term gross impression. One of the whole areas that we've all been wrestling with in multimedia measurement and trying to bring it together is to bring a commonality so that when we're seeking the duplication, when we're trying to undupe and get reach and frequency across platforms, we actually have something meaningful. And if we're measuring an average quarter hour in radio and commercial minute for certain types of TV and circulation for other media, aren't we mixing and matching apples and oranges? And how are you going to address that? Because I would suggest on the advertising side, with the technology and the tech that we have available today, shouldn't we be trying to move towards an ad exposure measure across all platforms?
There's not a meeting that I go to with major research companies that we deal with that I don't talk about the importance of divorcing content measures from ad exposure. I think it's a critical step that the industry needs to take. Having said that, now I'm going to do my part. That's a step that we've reserved for phase 2. This is about content exposure, which we need to understand. There are many things about this that are, in many ways, ESPN makes a great test bed for this, because we aren't that concerned with time shifting, because people don't time shift sports to any measurable degree, and we're on all these different platforms that they use all the time. ESPN is an enormous brand, it's easy to measure. This is a sort of, we need to get kind of up on our feet and walking before we get to the time shifting and the ad exposure. I understand your point about quarter-hour measures, and I don't have any statement about that today. That's something that ESPN, as the collaborator on this, is going to be doing with ComScore and with Arbitron to understand what the best way is to do that. But ultimately, I think we all have the same goal, which is how many people were exposed to an ad? How many times were they exposed to an ad? And what's the total volume of actual exposure to ads? And that's my goal, too. So I think we are aligned on this thing on that.
One last question for Mr. Glenn.
There's a gentleman in the
Go ahead, Bob, please. Hold on one second.
Assuming this works perfectly well, as it will, in a year from now, 2 years from now, everything that you've outlined is in place. What's to prevent a media buyer from making one buy for all platforms with one CPM?
It sounded kind of like a trick question.
Trust me, it's not a trick.
You mean using this? Well, I think that brings us back to the question of currency. And to tell you the truth, in order to answer that question, I need to see some data. I don't really have any. We're just starting to get the earliest trickles of data out of this. I think that, I'm not a statistician. I just play my work. I have a good nose for stuff that looks good and doesn't look good, and that's what we're going to be looking for first. I don't, ideally, to create a single, again, ecosystem of buying would be great. I think, though, there's a lot of work to be done before we get to that point.
I think what you're also hearing, too, is that there's, in essence, the elephant in the room are the silos of which we approach television and radio and print and tablet and mobile. And I mean, how many, the freight train of and also just breaks down after a while. So the fact that an ESPN, which is actually quite stellar in many of those media, actually is starting to try that harmonization process. I think it's pretty clear from the ad buying perspective that it may not be sitting around waiting for that sort of perfect measurement conduit to a Nielsen rating, because it probably doesn't exist anymore. Arguably, a Nielsen rating is probably a part of a bigger melange, if you will, or a fruit salad, if you will, that effectively tells the whole story. If you could wrap it up in one sort of concise sentence or two, how do you see ESPN leading the charge for translating this goodness that you're talking about into the reality of the media buying community who hasn't necessarily been rushing to put those disparate approaches together, television, radio, etc.?
I think that Artie, our leader, fearless leader Artie Bokenham up here, very quickly realized as we were going through this immense process of ESPN XP that cross-platform research is a situation where the perfect is very much the enemy of the good. We are not going to get to an absolutely perfect measurement system. We need something that, and the chairman of Griffin mentioned this at the air, we need something that enables us to transact business. We're not even there yet. We need to move forward, at least provide a basis for moving forward. We're not going to have a single panel that measures everything that's going on. Data integration is absolutely going to be required. We just need to make sure that we do it in a way that accurately reflects how consumers are consuming media today and how they're going to be consuming media 5 years from now. And that's what we think we're doing with this project.
Excellent. Thank you very much. This is very enlightening. The buy side keeps up with what the content side is doing. Right? The idea of sitting back waiting for that magic currency to transact business, it ain't going to happen without the buy side stepping up, doing their own thing as well, preferably in partnership with the content. All right, it is lunchtime. Please enjoy the fine buffet. We will be back in this room a little later this afternoon. I think it's around 2:30-ish, 3 o'clock-ish, for 2 more panels, including one at the end of the day, which is going to be hosted by Warren Lee from the World of Venture Capital, which I think will be a pretty good outsider's perspective into issues related to measurement and potential risks. So thank you very much. We'll see you later this afternoon after lunch and a bio break. Thank you. Okay, if everybody fell for that joke, there is no lunch yet, so I apologize. So, folks who are on the next panel, if you want to step up and have a seat on the list. That's okay. We'll be back. We realize there's no lunch.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Pretty on top of that.
No, I mean, kind of, but. No, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, and I've been I was brought on to start videos for the company, clients, and yeah. The media planners and media buyers of the company, they're your client facing. Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, I was doing a presentation at work. So many. Yeah.
Yeah, the lunchtime little joke here. Come on in, we're going to get our next panel on the way. Please, everyone, come down the front.
sorry for spreading the rumor about lunch, but you know what? There will be lunch eventually, so. All right, come on in. All right, so we started with, I think, a very, very solid representative voice from a major content provider who is admittedly struggling to figure out not only measurement, but the potential currencies and impact on the ad sales proposition of their business. And clearly, it probably stirs up a lot more issues and questions than it does answers. But as Tony said earlier, you have to give kudos to folks like ESPN to kind of take that plunge, even though there's no necessarily easy roadmap to it. Part of that mixture, right, is this notion that video is not just a television experience. We all know this. We all see this about tablet behaviors, whether that's in concert with a big TV set or despite it. Whether that's a mobile device, whether that's a tablet, hell, even out-of-home video consumption, which has always been a challenge to measure and to ascertain. So our panelists today in this conversation, we're going to kind of delve into the second and third screen and maybe infinite screen. And Mike Glantz from Forrester Research is our moderator for this panel, and unfortunately is now the barrier between everybody here and lunch. But that's my issue, and I'll go work on that. But please, Mike, go ahead and take it.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Glantz. I'm an analyst here at Forrester Research, serving CMOs and senior marketing leaders. So if just about everyone now has a second and maybe even third screen, and they're watching more and more video across these devices, advertising needs to be seamlessly packaged, delivered, and measured everywhere consumers are. But different devices need different hardware, different operating systems, and scores of different relationships with publishers and advertisers and service vendors, all of which can add up to a serious headache for any marketer wanting to buy video across screens. Who's helping marketers navigate all this? With me to discuss this in more detail is Rich Astley from Videology, Natalie Bokenham from the IPG Media Lab, Paul Bremer from Rhythm Media, Ryan Griffin from Digitas, and Peter Colapietro from SapientNitro. We're going to talk a little bit for about 40 minutes or so, and then I want to leave some time for Q&A to the audience. So if you have questions, please write them down, and we'll get someone with a mic come around. So I want to quickly just, maybe if each of you can give a 30-second intro about...
And the mic's on.
Yes. Maybe you guys want to down the line, give a 30-second intro about, who you are and what you're working on.
Sure. Paul Bremer from, can you hear me back there? Yeah. Paul Bremer from Rhythm. We are the largest mobile video ad platform, working almost exclusively with large media companies, help put them in the mobile video space years ago, and let me be the first to say I actually think that mobile is the first medium.
Okay.
Hi, Rich Astley from Videology. We're an addressable audience platform working across all major screens, and I oversee our global product strategy.
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Bokenham from the IPG Media Lab. We are an innovations resource for IPG brand clients and also to a host of media owners and new media vendors wanting to do media experiments with us to test ad effectiveness.
Hi everyone, Ryan Griffin with Digitas. We're a full-service digital marketing agency. In my role, I happen to oversee a good bit of our mobile activation across the country, which can see second and third screen pieces. Also play a market development role for our digital content new fronts, which is an effort that we've effectively pioneered to run alongside and in tandem with the television and broadcast networks.
How you doing? Peter Colapietro, work at SapientNitro, media side. Kind of going between working closely with our strategy department as well as planning, buying, and executing across multiple channels.
Great, thanks everybody. So I want to start with you, Natalie, because you work very closely with the consumer insight side of all this. Can you share some of the more recent insights you have about how consumers are watching across screens?
Absolutely. So we just completed a study with Uni, which actually just got released last week. And one of the major insights from that is that while video consumption is happening across different screens and is fragmented, video consumption behaviors are in fact very similar to how they used to be in terms of where and how video is being consumed. So, we can talk about sort of fragmentation across screens a lot, but actually let's be realistic and practical about when people have time to actually sit back and view video and consume entertainment. So we actually find that despite the fact that people are using screens in different ways and consuming content across screens, it's either happening on the couch or on the bed. And we find that actually the couch is the ultimate multitasking video consumption environment, and the bed is the ultimate single-tasking video consumption environment.
What about with the relationship between video consumption and linear TV watching? Is there an opportunity for a consumer doing both at the same time, or is it one of the other?
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of both going on. So of course there's a lot of buzz about dual screen synchronized viewing. I think that's absolutely an insight and this behavior that we can no longer ignore. I remember being really surprised with the study last April, again with uni, sort of in the wild, in lab, study to understand really why people were ignoring TV ads. And we went into that study with the assumption really that it was because people were fast forwarding through ads. But actually that only accounted for a sliver of ad avoidance. And in fact, the majority of ad avoidance, the cause of it, was secondary distraction media, which is of course the smartphone and now the tablet. And so I remember being really, really surprised by that at the time. It was definitely a baked-in behavior with a whole sort of second screen or synchronized screen sort of app market that's developed since then.
What are the rest of the panel? Is there a big opportunity for synchronized ad experiences across TV and video, or is that something that we're still waiting to develop?
I'd say there absolutely is. I think it's going to be probably the NBC Universals of the world who have to bring all of their great content from TV onto that second screen, whether it be a tablet or otherwise. Before that happens, it's going to be difficult to have that multi-screen or dual-screen functionality, where you can, if you're watching TV and something else is going on and you want to continue watching but you can't watch it where you're sitting, change that screen so that now you're watching on your tablet from exactly where you are from a live TV standpoint. When things get to that point, I think there's absolutely a huge marketplace, at least from my standpoint, to come up with super integrated ways to mimic what's going on live TV from an ad standpoint to what's in your hands.
See, I'm not convinced yet that second screen as a kind of synchronized opportunity is quite there. I mean, the reason I say that is, part of the experiences at the moment, the consumer experience just isn't good enough. It takes some time to get your smartphone there and synchronize with a TV ad and for it to capture in time. It's a fraction of a percent that anyone's actually doing it. I think where the opportunity is where there are these kind of background apps where you're really immersed in, let's say, a program, you downloaded the app already, you set it to synchronize with the show, it opens up new content. I think that kind of background synchronization has a huge amount of potential. The sort of right here, right now synchronized stuff, I'm not convinced it's quite there yet.
I guess I'm sort of in the middle on that. I agree that if there isn't good content being put into those environments, there's really no compelling reason to go there yet. If you look at the studies of what people are doing, people are obviously using multiple devices while watching television now. But if you look at the top behaviors, there are things like checking email and doing other things unrelated to the programming. And you could argue distracting them from the programming, which is probably why all these big media companies are eager to find a way to sync and get that undivided attention back. But it starts with being clever about the content and the programming. And for certain shows that have a lot of loyalty and you want a lot of rich, deep background information, The Voice and those type of shows, I could certainly see there being an application.
Okay, well, these applications we've been talking about, the Vigil or Shazam into now, it's a question for Peter and Ryan. What side of the house does that fall on the agency side? So who plans that?
I'll hop in. Depends on the kind of, design and setup of your agency, but generally speaking, it's obviously with the folks that are more responsible for either digital display or mobile side. Right? Those people get the metrics, they understand engagement things. We try to obviously connect in, and we want to look at TV schedules and see what we can do, obviously, to try to think about it in an integrated fashion. But just to kind of build on the previous question, because it is very important, I think, to talk about content owners starting to program for two screens as actually being the impetus that is really going to drive that behavior. I don't think we're going to solve it coming in and saying, hey, let's do sync ads, right? Because I think the behavior's got to start with kind of the native content consumption and what matters there. So to bring it back to this question here, we'll think through with the AMC, right, who's been very progressive with story sync and some of the things they do with their program. I'm a huge Walking Dead fan, if anyone else is out there. But that gives you a real reason to root in. That gives you more of a reason almost to pay closer attention. And guess what? I don't fast forward through ads when I watch that. I watch it live, and I'm more apt probably to notice a television ad, even though I've got story sync in my lap, than I would be otherwise. So again, from a media planning perspective, we think about it that way through, I think, the lens of content and see how we can sync it up that way to really drive that right value exchange for the consumer.
I'd be in agreement with Ryan there in the sense that what consumers are really looking for in second screen experiences is absolutely not more ads. We did a study which was very, very clear about that. And what people are really looking for is an ability to interact with live TV programming, or to be able to get that background information being so populating in that app as the story goes along. And so I think that the best-in-class examples of these sort of synchronized apps, or definitely the ones that sync as opposed to the apps where you have to actively check into a show, which is clunky and useless and very focused on commercials, and more about the sort of into nows and Shazam did as well. Shazam just recently announced that it's actually going to be syncing live with programming as well as with commercials, which I think is going to be a huge leap. And I know that Into Now has been working on the ability to just basically check in once to a viewing session and not have to recheck into shows and recheck into different portions of the show. And I think someone said ambient earlier, I think that sort of notion of sort of ambient companion media, that's when it's going to get really, really useful and useful.
So this is a whole new class of media that's been present. How has that changed the relationship between creative development and media?
I'd say.
Looking at you pretty hard there.
Yeah, I was like, I can't get out of this one. No, it's probably from an age standpoint, a huge thing because getting to market quick is important. And working with some of these types of technologies is not a quick thing, and there are only a few out there who can truly do it fast, I'd say. But probably the bigger problem, to Natalie's point, is the behavior and matching to that. The mobile phone and the tablet are still kind of private devices, and I think the behavior that we have to look there is coming up with much more integrated, useful type advertising, not banner ads, not things that are just in your face trying to pop up, but stuff that has to do with what's going on, that's actually going to be useful and interesting to you, entertaining, has to give some type of utility. And I think until we can figure out how to add utility to a fast and basically production timeline, then it's going to be difficult to be able to sell it into any client.
What about just in general, forget the complementary experience of TV, just different places that a video ad can live? Is the days of taking a 30-second TV spot, putting it out there as your video ad set, is that the right thing to do still?
I'd say no, we don't do that. I mean, over the past 5 years, we've seen a crazy evolution in where pre-roll has come and what type of ad units, and everybody here probably knows that there are so many different types. From a planning standpoint, the way we look at it and the way we basically strategize with our clients is saying, just because it's video doesn't mean it's right for the tactic or the goal that you have in mind. Every single video product has an alignment to a tactic, irrespective of the actual creative itself. So I think that's where we start.
I would just add, I completely agree there. I'd just add to that though, if you're a big TV advertiser now, there's no excuse why you shouldn't be using your 15s or your 30s across platforms and across screens as well, right? And I completely agree. Yes, absolutely, there's opportunity for more immersive experiences, and that could be repurposing your 15 or 30 with great interactive, creative, could be linking to local dealerships and store locators and all that kind of stuff that comes with the medium. But I think right now there's absolutely no excuse for not being multi-screen.
Just adding on to that, if you think about that when 30s came from TV to the online environment, that for a while seemed like the appropriate length. And I don't know whether it was because just repurposing existing creative. It's difficult if you've got it running auto ad or something to be able to repurpose that, and the creative agencies get a little angry when you cut 15 seconds off of their multi-million-dollar spots. But the same thing is, and I think that over time we learned a lesson there that wasn't necessarily appropriate to run 30s. There still are some in the online environment, but 15 is the currency, and now we're doing the exact same thing over again. So the 15s have now made their way into the tablet and the smartphone space, and that may not be the right length either. It depends on the environment, whether it's an app launch or whether it's actually somebody sitting down and watching long-form programming, which is much more similar to TV environment than other mobile experiences. So I think that we would be wise, and one of the things that we're doing at Rhythm is currently engaging with a few advertisers and some third-party research folks to do a ad effectiveness of various different durations. And instead of lengthening these things and taking these 2-minute YouTube clips that all advertisers seem to enjoy doing these days, we're actually looking at shorter duration spots, 7 to 8 seconds versus 15s versus 30s. And we'll probably be releasing some of that early next year. And I think you will probably not be surprised by the results, that there will be more consumer adoption and more consumer value exchange there based on lengths that they feel are commiserate with the experience that they're going to have. Video clips, shorter ads, full-length programming, probably more like TV.
Just to add a little bit on to what Paul was just saying, we also just did a study with Undertone, which sought to kind of understand what makes a video ad effective, more in terms of format and interactivity. And we found that click-to-play ads versus autoplay ads both drove awareness, but autoplay ads drove awareness at the cost of being liked. So if you want your brand to be liked, you should run click-to-play ads. If you just care about awareness, then go for autoplay. Just wanted to throw that on you.
Yeah, I'd add to that from, we do cost per view in as many places as possible. Doing CPM video, in my opinion, is a thing of the past and should be. So having user intent, I think, is hugely important in not pissing off your audience, which is ultimately what you want to do. But from a video standpoint, just because my background is heavily weighted or grounded in the DR realm, we're progressively using video to bring people into the marketing pools, to bring them in based on interest, getting them to do a desired action, which just basically fixes them, and to take them back later, we want to show you some other stuff. So from a DR perspective, I think video is a huge thing, but needs to be kind of, to your point, and what the length is, to get somebody just to do that, to that one action, so that you get them to talk to later.
And cost per view is an interesting sort of different metric that people are looking at, and I think that companies like ours are very comfortable with that because we've got about 89% completion rates across our industry universe. But it's interesting the way that other folks are pricing things that may seem similar but have vastly different completion rates. And so the cost per view model is sort of a great equalizer, and one that we certainly have.
This is another question I just want to ask, a larger one, is what, you've been all saying effectiveness and engagement. What would you say is effectiveness by each screen? What makes a video on tablet effective versus on a TV screen? And what are the differences between each screens?
First of all, at the lab, we sort of break down ad effectiveness in sort of 3 ways. We look at attention, and in order to measure attention, we use eye tracking methods. We also look at emotional response, either using bracelets or using vision coding software. And then we also do ad effectiveness and ad recall surveys as well. And actually this uni study that I said that we just completed sort of looked at all 3 measures on 4 different screens. So that included linear TV, connected TV, tablets, and mobile. And the whole point of the study was to work out, are all screens equal? And we were expecting the answer to be no. But in a certain respect, the answer was they are all equal in terms of attention and emotional response to video advertising on all those different screens. But what we found was with linear TV, it actually ended up being the least effective when it came to unprompted recall. And that we attributed to the fact that TV is such a cluttered, linear TV is such a cluttered environment, with about 27% of airtime being made up of ads. And so what we say is like all screens are kind of equal to an extent, but if you want your ads to be remembered, you should really consider still the big screen, because we actually found that amongst young people, the big screen was still more effective, even though you might expect them to be more in tune with mobile and tablets. And we'd say still go for the big screen, but if you can't afford to be spending lots of, buying lots of GRPs on TV, then you might consider connected TV experience, which ends up at about more like a 7% add to programming ratio.
So if I'm an advertiser, should I be spending more money for a mobile ad that has more attention span, or does screen size affect pricing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, your points about sort of emotional engagement with advertising, and that's obviously a very, very smart way to look at it. What we obviously see response rates across screens, so that would be things like completion rate, click-through rate, and what we do see is that there are kind of endemic challenges to each and every screen, or opportunities to each and every screen, which make a big difference. So, and Paul, you might challenge me on this one, but mobile, for example, we see great click-through rates, not such good completion rates. Connected TV, just by virtue of the fact you can't click out of it, you see fantastic completion rates. So I think, to your question, it really does depend on what are your objectives of the campaign. Is it, I want to get that really strong, kind of likable, emotional connection with my audience, or is it, I want as many people as possible to see the end frame of my ad, because that's where the offer is. I think it really depends.
The only thing that I would add there is just, it's pretty clear, I think, from this conversation that it is all about orchestration of your video across multiple screens, platforms, creative formats. I mean, you're kind of on the creative side, but not really. So I'll pile on the creative guys a little bit here. One of the things that we're trying to challenge our creative partners on is to create for multiple dimensions. Don't just think of your TV storyboards, throw it into testing, have that come back positive, and then say, oh, and then, again, divvy out our 15s, the 15 version online, and maybe we can try to figure out a way to do a different cut down, but we don't have enough working budget for it. So it is all about strategic approach, and it is all about how you kind of filter those things down, I think. And I think that people are starting to get a handle on it, but at the end of the day, then, as a function of that, it becomes, what does your brand want to do? Right? And I think Natalie's approach is absolutely correct and right and incredibly intelligent for the highest common denominator level. That's all you guys can really do, but it does come down to at a very more minute level, brand objectives and goals are going to drive what that orchestration looks like.
Okay. So I think we've mentioned a lot about integration and working together. How much of that are you guys doing at Digitas? And if there's not as much as it's being held up by the sales side, what are you guys doing on that side as well?
So I'll address this, I guess, through the lens of some of the upfront approaches that we've tried to take, both in concert from a television marketplace perspective and saying, hey, we want to do a multi-screen deal. We want to talk about video neutral or video agnostic delivery and what that looks like. And we've had some success there. A partner like Viacom has actually been really great with working with us, and we've had some great deals in place there to permit delivery across television sets, desktop or laptop computer, as well as a tablet or a handset. And a lot of the questions around valuation were some of those big questions that we had to work through with them as part of that. In terms of working with some of the broadcast networks, it continues to be a challenge, quite frankly, and trying to find the right kinds of incentives, I think, for the main television network folks and the digital folks to work together. It doesn't seem to be, that still in place, even at this point in time. We push every year. We re-engage every year to try to have the conversation around, a multi-screen deal, and it's just not necessarily there. I mean, there are different marketplaces. Television moves at its own pace, and when that market breaks, you gotta, obviously be ready to do what you need to do, for that huge pool of investment. So I mean, I think some folks on the cable side are being more aggressive with it. We continue to work with the broadcast, but I expect next year to probably be the first year where we've got some meaningful traction. I mean, I think this past year, again, at Digitas, we do these kind of digital content refronts in advance of the television market to try to get people thinking about, what their digital video presence could look like when married to TV. And, we're going to continue to do those kinds of things to try to promote this thinking. And I think we're making progress and we're making traction overall.
I think it sounds one of the big things that we're circling around here that's been discussed today is measurement. And how do we measure it? And the measurement companies are all working on this. But, spell it out for me. How important is a standardized currency for TV and video advertising, and are we actually headed for one?
I'll jump in. I'd say it's very important. And I think that one of the things that's holding us back, in addition to the siloed challenges that Ryan mentioned, which is interesting, all the agency people say that the publishers are
we do it too. We are it too.
And they're probably both right. But ultimately, what we really need to do to advance this is to try to find some way of valuing this, some common currency that we can all agree to that is a baseline. And I say a baseline because ultimately there may be things in the tablet and smartphone space that are more valuable than in the TV space. The uncluttered environment, not 830s in a pod, but maybe 215s. But that might be discounted by the size of the screen or scale. But that might then have a better result based on the fact that it's a full screen experience versus an online experience that tends to have a lot of different windows open. So as long as you can come up with a baseline currency, which I am not prepared to announce today, that we could build off of, I think then you can start valuing and devaluing up and above that line.
See, I would actually argue those currencies are there. I mean, I think there are now cross-platform, panel-based solutions, which I'm sure everyone in this room has heard about and knows about. The challenge is agreeing which currency. There's, I think, more often than not, and to the question about integration within agencies, and I can say this having worked in the agency world for 10 years, the challenge is we've got different groups buying with different types of currencies. And it's not until everyone can kind of come together and say, hey, right, we agree on this definition of an EGRP or whatever we want to call it, that you're going to get that true element of integration that needs to happen. I mean, when we see TV teams buying on a GRP across digital screens, we see phenomenal results and a real, the increase in kind of budgets that happens in video that way is phenomenal. Suddenly they get it. Like, okay, right, I can buy on a GRP. This is my basic reach and frequency metric that I'm used to buying TV with all of my life. I can do this. It just takes that step to step.
So is that the answer then? If video wants to grow in budget spending, it needs to do GRPs?
And that's not to say that we think that the GRP is the only metric. I think it is one of several metrics, and I think it just happens that at the moment for TV buyers, GRP continues to be the most comfortable metric on which they're buying.
Yeah, let's add to that. We have Magna Global Intelligence, which is our media forecasting arm, and they forecast that by 2016, 10% of homes will rely entirely on internet streaming for their TV consumption. So when we tell that to clients who come through the lab, that's normally really staggering because they're like, oh my goodness, we're so reliant on TV. But actually, if you flip it, by 2016, 90% of TV consumption is going to be linear. And so therefore, until that ratio really changes, sort of GRP seems to be the lowest common denominator for an actual currency for the business. But from our perspective at the lab, in terms of measuring ad effectiveness, finding a common currency, and even when we get to that point, isn't really going to help us with our clients and helping them decipher what screens or how to behave on those different screens. So for our part, we'll continue to do our media experiments that kind of dig deep into specific insights that we can then feed back out to clients as best practices.
I mean, Mike, we talked about this. My perspective is, GRPs are not going away, obviously, and we have to adjust. I would always advocate for something along the lines of what a lot of people, not alone calling it this, but kind of a GRP plus, right, where you're trying to factor in, it's a blend of what both Paul and Rick are saying, really, you're trying to factor in some of those things like, what's the trade-off with ad clutter? What's the trade-off with effectiveness? What's the trade-off from a pricing perspective? What does the universe look like, right? And you come down to the need to unfortunately create some kind of an index that makes these kinds of adjustments. But I do truly believe that that is what's necessary to truly capture the appropriate lens on value, right? When you come down to this larger question. So we've done that for some of our clients. Again, if you start with a GRP, you can get some nice budget shifts. You start laying in some of these other things, you can make it even better, make it more of a compelling case. So I think one of the challenges there is it becomes a brand by brand, almost solution, and the numbers and the indexes and the way you change things are going to be different for every brand, which doesn't help for standardization. But I think at a high level, if you just think about GRP Plus in a general way, that's something that could go a little bit farther in creating an equitable view across rates.
Yeah, we actually have something called the MAG value index, which is very similar. So it takes sort of GRPs, and then the plus element will be how quickly a viewer will switch from that program to an ad. That's one thing that gets sort of put into the algorithm. And then another thing that we're starting to do as well is looking at how social that content is, and then putting a value on that as well, and that really helps guide our sort of TV and content purchasing at MediaPost.
And for all the digital skeptics in the room who are saying, I can't believe we're talking about taking all these great mediums that have all this information and marrying it up to TV. TV works, and it continues to work very effectively. And I think as an industry, we've done ourselves a disservice by trying to be different for this long. Our brand manager at Unilever knows exactly how many GRPs they need to buy in order to move a new product in retail at grocery stores and at drugstores. So that's a proven model. We don't have in between that the click-through and the completion rate and all these other things. But they know how that works. So I think as an industry, it's nice that these conversations are starting to happen. And I think we should be pushing it forward in this direction. Yeah, let's step down off my sound.
At the end of the day, we're all here to move products or services for marketers, right? And we have layered proxy metric on top of proxy metric because we have them. And at the end of the day, I think we just have to ask ourselves, does this help the marketer sell more product or sell more services?
Yeah, I fully agree with what we've been talking about so far. Figuring out the GRP situation as a whole is going to help move budgets for those who are ingrained in that type of planning process. But to me, it's really currency with video and TV and digital video. It's kind of split between two. It's the planning, which we've kind of been talking about, but also the reporting side. So to your point, just because the metrics are there doesn't mean they're important or doesn't mean they shouldn't be discounted. Either way you're looking at it. So what I think as an industry, and I guess is what the difficulty I see on an ongoing basis, is kind of that level set, what those reporting metrics should be, and what as an industry we should be pushing, because every technology and everything's evolving so quick that some things here don't have the same ability to track that in another medium, and the technology isn't there yet, or maybe it never will get there. Click-through rates compared to completion rates compared to the quartile views, whatever it may be. So I think that's where we're the industry has to agree on from a reporting standpoint what to do. But to get there, obviously, money has to shift in a big way. I think getting that GRP conversation is part of it, but more so is that index, because TV is somewhat less fragmented than the digital video space. And until you can kind of quantify something on a mobile to a tablet, and even within those, because there are different types of units, until we get there, I think it's going to be difficult to tackle the reporting side.
But it sounds like a lot of people on the stage today are differentiating the agencies and the publishers that they work at by the way what they measure and how they report. So if we all move towards a more standardized metric, is someone going to lose out?
Lose out in terms of?
I mean, SapientNitro might look at things a certain way and use a certain type of lens to use, Brian's point, and how they plan. If you have a standardized currency, once you have more of a commoditized product?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge to come up with that standardization. Things are moving so quickly that to nail it down and say this is what it is, it's going to change tomorrow. So understanding how to evolve with it, I think is probably the important part, because we're not done here. I mean, we could be sitting at this same situation in 5-10 years where TV exists as a digital stream exclusively. We might come back here. I'm not saying we have to stay here the whole time. But we don't know where the whole digital DTV and kind of push-pull cable boxes and how that's going to work, and where the Comcast versus the NBC Universals are going to really flesh out, and how they give content to people, because people are clamoring for it. They want it in other places, and right now it's really only on TV. The HBO Go's of the world, those are going to have to come up and bubble up to the top for people to watch them and want to watch them on multiple screens.
and I don't think this applies to everything. I mean, the things that Digitas is doing and that Magna is doing are at the forefront of the industry because they're looking at some of the biggest brand advertisers in the world and how they can participate in this new world. But there are still going to be digital video opportunities in the long tail. There are still going to be mobile video opportunities within casual games and things like that. They're not going to be part of this uniformity. This isn't going to be something where we all start wearing the same uniform one day. So I think that what they're talking about in the type of upfront deals and taking the things that are working well for their brand advertisers and applying that to new mediums is really kind of, that's where the borders of this are. And I don't think it's going to take over the world, but it certainly will help move and budget shift, I think, toward the mediums that are frankly deserving of it based on just how many people are going to use it.
Okay. And are there any, if I'm a marketer today who I believe in all this and I want to look at my TV and video spending on the same way, if I can, what consistent metrics should I be caring about today, if at all?
Well, I mean, I think there are standards you can look at, right? And I think obviously reach and frequency at the very most basic is something that can be defined across screens. Quality of audience is I think crucially important as well. So we were talking earlier on about you hit your GRP delivery, great. What does that mean? So I'd say the next step from there is once you've reached your audience with your GRPs, what are they doing? What do they look like? So looking at the profile, let's say clickers versus people who've completed videos. And then the step beyond that is to actually start factoring in ROI. So that would be where you're potentially looking at control versus expose and impact on in-store purchase, which is something we can do right now. And there's no reason why a CPG marketer can't deliver a campaign across screens and look at the influence, and we're doing this, the influence of each and every screen on in-store purchase.
Yeah,
I think attribution modeling is probably not talked about enough these days, just because things are the way they are. Everybody knows it's the big thing that you have to talk about and address, but I think for you it's difficult to actually make it happen. And I'm just talking about even from a digital-only perspective, not even bringing in TV or radio or at home. But it's difficult because search always gets that last click and always gets the credit. But there are so many other things that should be taken into account. I think that's part of the challenge too.
Excuse me, I would just add that we're kind of having our own Nielsen +4 moment right now as more and more people talk about viewability in general as a metric. I mean, I think that's certainly something that in the Wild West that is the digital video world, something that marketers have to consider from a perspective of what is the quality of the video inventory that a metric is superior.
Yeah, we actually did an undertaking study that we did. We found that besides click-to-play being incredibly successful in driving brand metrics, other things that really mattered was site quality. So much, the content around which your video is being placed had a huge halo effect on brand metrics as well. And another thing that we took away from that study was that size matters. Size matters in terms of the video player when you're looking when you're viewing online, but it also matters in that multi-screen study we did with Yumi, where the 40-inch TV, whether it be connected TV or linear TV, still drove metrics of sort of excitement and attention more than the smaller screen. Even amongst those young folks that I was mentioning earlier, you would expect to be more engaged and familiar with those smaller screens.
All right, I want to, a couple more questions. I want you all to look in your crystal balls for a minute. What's the agency going to look like in 2 years? How will it be structured?
Ronnie, you got to go first so we can all agree on this.
Be careful what you say, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And it's hard because I don't know that there is a stereotypical or general agency setup for this kind of thing. For some of our clients within Publicis Group, we'll work with a Starcom or a MediaPost and kind of share media planning and buying responsibilities across quote-unquote traditional and quote-unquote digital. And in those ways, I'm involved in a business that has co-location, right? So we have Digitas people sitting in Starcom offices to aid and facilitate the integration of what we do for that individual brand. And I think at minimum there's going to be defined points in time where the intersections between those kind of traditional and digital quote-unquote groups have to come together, right? And whether that's around, the lead up to the TV marketplace, right? And we're all going together and we're saying, with each network, we're making a concerted cross-screen play. We see how that nets, and then we break back apart, for us to kind of do our things with Paul and Rick and, Rhythm and Videology on down the line, where it's more kind of purely in the digital lane. We're starting to do that now, so, is that a big 2-year thing? I don't really know, but I think regardless, what you have to see is kind of a coming together of both intelligence and kind of a sell story for brand marketers around how their video asset, Big B, is being really kind of delivered across the streets.
Yeah, no, I think the other big change, and we're already starting to see this, and I'd like to think this trend will continue. So in 2 years' time, we'll see this thing much more in reality. Is that data is just becoming more and more of a problem and more of an opportunity for agencies. They're obviously at the heart of where data is created and collected. And really, to see the agency world changing to be much more about data science, and I think data has to be at the heart of decision making. And you look at, I would say, advanced TV or addressable TV, whatever you want to call it, is the perfect kind of intersection there, where it's essentially linear TV with improved addressability, and you've now got 22 million households that have some concept of addressable delivery in-house. That takes a very different mindset in terms of the way that you're approaching screens, and I would say you're going to get more and more digital-minded and data-capable people that are going to be moving into some of those mediums.
I'd say that at IPG, the lab was really created as an environment where brand clients and agents and media owner partners could really engage in a sort of media agnostic environment. So we typically have sort of CMOs and sort of other C-level client executives, along with all the different agency teams, and occasionally inviting media owners where relevant to speak at these events. So that's kind of IPG's sort of solution to kind of the sort of slightly siloed structure that sort of agencies typically follow. So that's what it's doing.
Yeah, I definitely mirror that. Being able to buy, since my background is in media, but also have a bit of a creative background. In my mind, the ones that are going to be successful are the ones that bring in those three together. Or I guess to add to it, analytics, creative, and media, to have individuals who have knowledge of each other's profession who kind of cross it a bit, because the silos, I think, come down to the individuals who are planning the stuff and talking about it. And if those people aren't getting in a room with each other at the very onset of any group, there's a big problem. And I think it's happening. I've seen a lot of success internally at SapientNitro when we're able to talk to the creative guys up front, tell them the types of units and the types of mediums we have at our disposal and what actually makes sense, and we start ideating about, well, I was thinking about doing this idea. Well, tailor it a little bit this way so that it makes sense for where I'm going to put it eventually. And I think those conversations need to happen in a much, much bigger way.
I guess I'll just round it out by adding a couple of things. I think part of it has to do with the composition of the agencies. You have TV buyers who are typically focused on branding, and the question will become, are they going to be the owners of the video strategy and buying moving forward, or will it be the digital natives who and I'm sort of being general here, but who come at it typically from a more DR-focused, metric-driven mindset? The answer is probably somewhere in between, where you can take all the wonderful things about TV and branding and things that are happening at the top of the funnel, and some of the metrics that are available further down the funnel, and marry them together in these new mediums, using video as the delivery mechanism. But I think it will be interesting to see what happens within these agencies. Once these other screens reach the scale that gets the attention of the TV buyers, you're going to see some interesting things.
I could go on for hours about this, but unfortunately that's the end of our time. But I want to thank my excellent panel here. Thank you. And on to lunch.
Okay, and speaking of lunch, I actually have my act together lunch. I've been told by managers, lunch is on your own unless you have an invite to one of the attendant lunches that are associated here. Lunch time is roughly around an hour. Main programming back downstairs on the 5th floor, and then the video track, we come back here at about 4:15, preceded by another presentation. So we'll see you later this afternoon, and thanks for coming this morning, and we'll hopefully see you later.